Okay, so we've already made a Borg texture tutorial, and as good as that was on a time lapse, and it wasn't a proper tutorial. So I'll tell you what, let's go back and have a proper look at it. So before we kick off on today's tutorial, I just want to say another massive thank you again, which I seem to be doing a lot these days on these videos, to everybody who liked and subscribed at the end of the last video, which was the hologram tutorial. If you've not checked that out, please do. It seems that people quite like that one. But yeah, absolutely astonished by the popularity of that video compared to the last, which was equally as good. So brilliant. Thank you very much. It's certainly spurring me on to make more of these videos. So if you enjoy this video, then please do consider giving it a like and a subscribe. So before we kick off on today's tutorial, some of you might notice that this one's a bit of a rehash of a previous video that I did on the Borg texture tutorial. Now, the problem with that one was that that was a time-lapse video, and as good as they are, they're not really that educational. A lot of detail is missing. So what we're going to do is we're going to dive in a bit more detail on this one and actually talk about how the texture is produced, and hopefully we get a bit more out of it. That's brilliant. If you do create your own artwork using any of these tutorials, please do drop a link in my comment section. I prefer to use ArtStation. I've got a link in there in my descriptions. And yeah, that'll be awesome. So let's crack on. Okay, so for this example, we're going to be using Blender 3.3.0. I'm pretty certain you need at least Blender 3 to use the geometry node. So if you don't have at least Blender 3.0 onwards, best jump over to blender.org and download it for free. Again, if you're having any trouble following what we're doing in this example, just drop a comment below and I'll try and answer it as best I can. So the first thing we're going to do is we're not going to delete the default cube. We're going to go straight into geometry nodes. If you follow the channel, I refuse to delete the default cube if I absolutely have to. Instead, I go into geometry nodes, click on the geometry nodes here. In fact, let's give this a name, Borg. Let's do it properly. I don't know if this ever happens to you, but I so frequently get it the wrong way around. In fact, you can see I've got a little signs on there. If you can follow them, great. If not, don't worry. Someone mentioned it in the comments on the last video, and I thought, oh, you know what? I'll try and sort that out. It's not a great one, but if you can follow along, that's great. Any problems, feel free to drop a comment below, and we'll sort it out for you. So, yes, back into geometry nodes. We've got our group input and the group output. We want to get rid of that one, so we've not deleted the default cube, more of a case of we've just exploded it. So we're going to go in for, tell you what, just type it in, cube. Now what we're going to do is we're going to build cube on cube on cube. We're going to layer it, and essentially what we're going to do is just have one object. I will call that object Borg as well. Heaven's sake. There we go, Borg. Now, the beauty of doing it this way is that we've got full control even after we've created everything. So we can go in and change stuff to our heart's content. For this first section, we're going to keep this pretty much the same. And the first thing we'll do is go set material and drop that in there. Now, before I do anything else, I'm going to create each material as we go, because if we do it the other way, if we build out our geometry nodes, you just won't get to see what's going on and it'll look just crazy. So we're going to build this first part here and go straight over to the shading tab, if it lets me. Let's put that kind of in the middle and try and expand this a little bit so you can see it. Okay, and that's the inner. And what we want to do is create that kind of inner effect. So if you remember what a Borg cube looks like, it's kind of got that inner glowing effect, and it's almost metallic with some glowing parts. So we're going to create that kind of shader first, and it's actually quite a fun shader to make. So we want a mix shader, plug into there. Then we want an emission. So we keep in the principal BDF, and you'll see why in a minute. You could simplify this and have a glossy BDF, but you'll find that actually this is going to give you a little bit more detail, and you'll like it. You'll like it. So we've got mix going on, and we want a Voronoi. texture. And I want to plug that straight into the shading tab. So you could just about see there the pattern that's going on. Let's make this green. And let's make this dark, pretty dark. Okay. And let's crank that number up. So it's, oops, where did that go there? Oh, I don't want 415. It would blind everyone. Okay. So I always do this. I turn on the node wrangler. If you've not got it switched on, you'll find it under add-ons. You just type node. So it's edit, add-ons, node wrangler. Make sure it's switched on. For whatever reason, Blender doesn't come with it automatically switched on. So if you're struggling, it's node wrangler on, and then it's Shift T, or is it Control T? I think it's Shift T. Find out in a minute. Now, what we want to do first. Oh, yeah, we missed one part there. We've switched that to object, and we want to put a color ramp in. That color ramp can go in there like that. Now then, let's crank this number up, and you'll see what's happening to the pattern. It's a little bit more complex. Let's give it a nice number, 15. I tend to find what looks best is Chevicek. You'll see what we're doing in a minute. If I grab this and I move this up to here, getting these little blotches of lid areas. Of course, you can go the other way, brightens it, but what we want to do is adjust that so that it's not all completely lit. There's a good chunk of it lit. I want to change that green a little bit, make it a bit more menacing. There we go. Find that Chevicek works best. F2 also puts just that little bit more into it. So let's do a little bit of that. And that's starting to look pretty good. But we want to give this a bit of detail now. So we're going to go bump, and this is why we're using the principal BDF. I want to plug a bump into there. And let's grab these two, pull them over here, and put the color straight into the height. And what that should do is start to give us a bit more detail. So there you go. It's actually quite a cool little shader to have. So it doesn't have to be a Borg Cube that you're building. I've used this shader in a couple of my other projects, and it's one of my favorite combinations. Let's drop that down a little bit. And just to add a bit more, because it's all about just adding a little bit of detail, plug into the roughness, you'll see that we can get varying roughness as it goes. So these are the things you're not necessarily going to see, but they're there. And I think if you add more detail or a little bit of detail, it just adds something to it. So that's your inner cube. And before we go any further, let's turn on bloom as well. That just seems to add a bit more. So there you go. You got your, let's turn the background as well into black. Here we go. So that's just gives you an idea. We'll leave that for now. The beauty of this process is that you can change it. You're not stuck with it forever. So it's quite a powerful process what we're using here. So let's put that on, and that is literally your inner cube. Now, what we want to do is we want to build this out. So the strategy is what we're going to do is we're going to have this inner section. Then we're going to cover this in a kind of a mesh. And then we're going to have another section. We're going to call it the mid plane. And there's going to be another mesh. And then there's going to be the outer plane. So we're building out on it. So what we want to do is we want to join. I don't want to join strings. I want to join geometry. Join geometry. There you go. Now, what we can do is we can duplicate that, Shift D, Control A, and what we want to do is create that kind of mesh. So we're going to have a meshed curve, and then we want a curve to mesh. What this does is it transforms vertices into mesh. So it takes your structure, throws away the faces essentially, leaves just the vertices, and then what this part does is it adds a circle around it. So it makes it look like a tube. So what we're going to do, first thing, we are going to make this cube that we've created here just a little bit larger, 0.01. We zoom in, you can just about see it there. It's this edging there. And what we want to do is we want quite a few vertices. So I'm going to create 10. 10 looks pretty good. Again, feel free to use however or as few vertices as possible. And we want a curved circle. And we want to plug that into there. Now, straight away, it's gone completely insane. That's because it's set to 1 meter. This is essentially, it's the same size as that. So you want to be using a much lower value. I find 0.25 works pretty well. You can vary that again. And that's created your grid. Now, if you remember the tutorial that I did on the beacon, we used exactly the same process. And so it's a very simple process to create a cage effect. So it's not just here, you can use it wherever. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put another set material in. Go down to this one here, create a new one, and we're going to call that wire. Or tube. Actually, you know, tube's better. We're going to put tube into there. And then what we're going to do is go back to shading. So it's already selected tube. And then what we're going to do is... there we go, it's working now. So we're keeping the BDF again. And this time, what we're going to do is, if you ever look to Borg cubes on Star Trek, you'll find that they look very much like big chunks of it just haven't been built. It looks half finished. So we're going to create that kind of half finished effect. For anyone who's that much of a danger to the Federation might actually spend a bit of time finishing their ships. But, you know, I didn't write Star Trek. So we're going to have... So what we've done here is we've got a principal BDF and we've got transparent. And at the moment, if I was to do that, you can see we're going from, oh, no, it's pretty much there, to fully transparent. So we want something to tell this factor what to do. So we're going to have a color ramp. And we'll plug that into there. And now we're going to have a noise texture. Plug that one into there. Now, if I go Control T, there you go, node wrangler on. It was Control T, not Shift T. Control T, and now if I start doing this, it should. Ah, yes, you've actually got to turn this on. Now then, to make this work in EEVEE, you've got to have alpha clip switched on and alpha hashed as well. I find works best. Do a bit of that. There we go. Pull that back to that, and you can see there what's going on. Part of your grid is disappearing, so don't want to go too far. We want just enough to kind of give the impression there's a grid, but obviously it's not quite finished. So play around with it, and you'll see just how far you can go. You just do it to your heart's content, and then when you're happy, that'll be it. So what I've also done there is I plugged that into the roughness, and when I turn this down a bit, it should give some varying effects. A little bit brighter than that. Okay, so that is your very simple shader setup for your grid. And we're actually going to use this one again, so it's worth just hanging on to it. So we're off to the geometry nodes again, and what we want to do is we'll Shift D, duplicate that, and we want to do a Shift D again, and what we do is we plug into here and this one up to here, but this time zoom in and we go, whoa, that's a bit crazy, don't want to do that. 1.03. It doesn't really matter for vertices here, because we're not using them. Here we go. Add a new material. So essentially what I've done is I've reduced that. So the fewer the vertices you have, the less harder your computer has to work. Now, for a Borg cube like this, it's not going to take a tremendous amount of firepower for you to render it. So really, that's not going to have a huge impact on your CPU requirements. If you've got loads of these, it might. because it just duplicates now. But as fewer, I tend to prefer to just have as fewer points as possible. So now what I want to do is mid-surface. I prefer to have the caps lock on. There we go. And very quickly, mid-surface. So that straight away is blanked off everything because it's bigger. So we go over to the shading tab and we'll start filling this one in. Now, as I said with the wiring section, Borg cubes, they look half finished. So we want something that's going to create kind of a half finished effect, but a very metallic-y effect. So we're going to go for a mix shader again, plan that into there. We're going to go for another transparency, but instead of a noise on the mix shader, we're going to go for a Voronoi texture. This one's a bit more interesting, this one. So color into there. We go Voronoi. So essentially what the whole process, and you'll see this a few times, is we're essentially using two shaders and we're using special patterns to kind of tell it what to do. Now then, this should start working. If I have definitely turned mid-surface on. Shading. It is there. Maybe if we change that, yeah, it's doing it. Okay, so you can see it now. We're going to go to Manhattan. Again, it's entirely up to you how you do it. Oh, completely forgot to alpha clip it and alpha clip it again. There we go. That makes a bit more sense. So we've gone Manhattan style. It doesn't need to be quite that big. So what we're doing is we're creating a extra section over it that just has a bit of detail. So let's put 15 in there. I always turn. I don't think if you have to. Oh, Shift T. There we go. Control T. I always get those two mixed up. And that's not looking too bad. So we can play around with these. And the beauty, as I say, the beauty of all this is that you can constantly change this. So completely make it your own. There we go. Not looking too bad at all. Add a bump. What the bump's going to do is kind of give it that extra little dimension to it. And we want to go into height. There we go. Now I did find that sometimes if you put a noise texture in as well, just gives you that little extra control, just more going on, just makes it a little bit more interesting. So let's let that catch up for a second. It's taking a while. There we go. And you can, as I say, you can play around with this, just enough to kind of cover it. So that's not looking too bad now. Obviously we can change this as we go. Now we've done that section, so let's move on to the next one. And go Shift D, duplicate these down and up. Now we're going to keep the same material in there, so all I want to do is go 1.0, let's call it 5 maybe. Now then, if I change this down to say 4, you can see that. Actually, let's just show you what's going on. So the more you put in, the different it looks. Any number other than the number that you had in your previous one. So any number other than 10. And it just gives you that extra kind of section going on there. It just adds, as I say, it just adds a little bit. It looks pretty good there. And now for the last part, we're going to go Shift D again. And we want to go up. Now this is a very simple approach to this shader. You can use as many layers as you like. I've used 5 here because that just works quite nice. I quite like the look of it. In fact, let's have another look at this. 1.3, 1.5. Yeah, let's make that 1.6. 0.06. This is kind of outer layer now. Yeah, you can add as many layers to this as you like. You can make it really complex. There's no real rule on it. Just it's meant to look messy. It's meant to look cluttered. It's meant to look very alien-y. So it's yeah, go crazy with it. It's fine. You're not going to get it wrong. Just experiment. And as I say, if you do experiment and you're happy with what you've done, or you just want to go, hey, this is what I did, please do share. I'd love to see what you come up with. So now we're on the outer there, and I want to go, not that one, I want to go there. And this is going to be very similar. In fact, let's cheat a little bit. Let's go back to our mid surface, and let's just copy this. So Control C, go back to the outer, Control V, delete that one, and just plug it straight in. And what that's going to do is that's going to create, you can see there the effects of turning your alpha clips on. Now, what you want to do is, you don't want it to be exactly the same, because all it's doing is mimicking what we've already done before. So let's play around with this a little bit. Let's change some of the settings. It gives you a real opportunity to change bits. And let's make that maybe a little bit darker. And yeah, actually, let's just take a moment and just play around with some of these numbers. So that's your noise. You can play around with that. In fact, if you were, just had a thought, actually, what you could do, if you were so well inclined, is you could actually make these 4D and you can animate them. And that's just one of the many things you can do with Blender. This is all very animatable. But yeah, that is, let's just go through that slowly so you can see it. In fact, just go up there, because I think this is the most important shader that you're going to have in this example. Let's just stay it there. So if you want exactly what I built, that's kind of what you want. I would say just the Voronoi texture, the noise texture, the color ramp, bump. Make sure they link in like these. Mix shader it out to the end, and you'll get something very similar to that. You're gonna struggle to get exactly what I've built here, but that's the whole thing about this, is that it's giving you the opportunity to create it your own and do it your own way. So it's not taking very long. That we've created a Borg Cube. Let's go back to the inner. You could play around maybe with a couple of settings. That looks pretty cool, actually. I quite like the look of that. That's pretty awesome. Let's leave it as Borg for now, but you can see there just a very simple tweak, and it looks pretty awesome. So before we leave this as is, let's go to the color on here. So this is the background, and we're going to create a very simple star background, and it won't take very long to do this. This is a mix shader into the surface. We want an emission. So let's plug that into there. So that's going to immediately make it a bit bright. And if I go of color ramp into there, and a Voronoi. Now at this point, it doesn't really matter which setting you use, because if we look around, it's created this kind of zone around it that is obviously not very starry. But if I turn that up to some crazy number, it looks very kind of edgy. There's lots of things going on there. So it's not that way. I want to drag this down. It just blots out the stars and drag it all the way down. There you go. And there you have it. You have got your kind of starry background. Let's go back to this mode here. And I think that looks pretty cool. Let's just quickly render that image. Now with it being on EEVEE, that is rendered in no time at all. Just a quick example. I don't expect you to do this. Don't worry, there isn't a test at the end of all this. You could have this set to 100. Don't need it set to 4,000. That's just crazy. Compositing. Let's do our standard bloom effect in here, and I want to go glare. This is only really if you're using cycles. So fog glow, let's just zoom in. So it's kind of it renders the image and then it goes through this compositing. This is your general render and then it goes through here and then it'll spit out a new image. So if I go viewer and plant into there, oops, helps if I actually click it. There we go. And that doesn't look too bad at all. I've set it to cycles. Make sure you've got GPU on. What else do we do before we press the button? Just make sure if you are going to do this that you have it all set up. I found that optics works best. That's my graphics card, so it's pretty good. Make sure that's switched on. It's better than CUDA. And just hit the render button. So remember the last one took half a second. So this is now going off and doing its own thing. So 5 seconds, and it's not too bad. That's the problem I found with cycles on this, though. It doesn't quite look right. So I do prefer EEVEE on this one. It's personal preference. There you go. That's EEVEE with that post-processing on. I find it's probably best, and you don't necessarily need it. In fact, I would suggest that is good enough by itself. So that is your fundamental cube. So let's just play around with that and have a look at a short animation. So a couple of tricks with the camera, some tracking and some really very simple animation, and we can create this kind of really cool flyby effect. But you're probably asking, okay, this is all very well and good, but this only really works for cubes. So if we go back to our session and we go back to the geometry nodes, yes, very much we have. Where's my Borg Cube gone? There you go. There we are. Let's zoom in. Let's make it look a bit more obvious. Okay. So yeah, this all looks very well and good, but as you can see, we're using standard stuff, and you could actually swap these out for spheres and whatever. But what if you've got something, you know, unique, and let's say, I don't know, a donut, for instance? You can actually apply this to a more complicated shape that isn't in your geometry node setup. So let's just quickly do that. So we're going to go Shift-D. We want to create another. Let's see, X. I want to move this across here, and let's just call this our test Borg. Okay, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna swap this out. Ooh, if we're gonna swap this out, for whatever reason that's not zooming now. We're going to swap that for another shape. So to do that, let's say, oops, wrong button. We're going to say torus, and let's go back to layout. Okay, let's do this. Let's do it all in here. It's a bit easier. So let's add our torus. And if you are new to Blender, then I do recommend you build your own donut using the Enterprise tutorial. That's where I started, and absolutely, totally rate that one. So that is just a simple torus we're going to put in, but we're going to apply it to this part over here. So we're going to go back into our geometry nodes. We're going to duplicate it because we only want it to apply for this one. So if I click here, you'll see it's Borg and Borg test. All those down. Close them up. Now, to put that torus into here, you literally grab it, right click, and just pull it straight in. You can see there, it's object info. Now, we can't just plug it straight into these. We are going to have to make a few changes. So, we're going to select them, wipe them out, and then what we want to do is we want to put some scale elements in. So, in fact, let's not do that just yet. Let's just show what happens if you do drop these in. Oops, wrong one there, and in, no, not into there, into there. It's always important to not put stuff in there, so that's 5 of them. You can see it's not quite there, so let's just kill, clear keyframes, clear keyframes. There we go. I wonder if it's a bug with Blender. I do find that when you're working with geometry nodes, if you have any data in here, anything on the timer, it just throws up an error now. I'd put theirs in so we could get that animation effect. So what you can see straight off is it's not right. So what we want to do now is we want to separate these out. So we want scale elements, and I want to put one in there. Shift D, one in there. Let's move these up so they are at least separate. Shift D, Shift D, and Shift D. Oops, let's close these down. Okay. Now, what we want to do is separate these out a little bit. So we're going to make scale, make them all 1% larger as we go. So it's 2, 3. There we go. And 4. And yeah, that's pretty good. So I've not changed any of this function over here. This main splitting it out into different parts and applying these materials. All I've done is removed the basic structure, the basic shape, and replaced it with something a bit more complex, and then applied scales. And what that does is it creates this rather cool, zoom in a little bit around it, like this. Camera, look at it that way. If anyone's interested in how you do this, it's using the camera to track. So G over there somewhere, just get it out of frame. And then we go to back to camera. I'm actually just mucking around at this point. Let's put that back to 0. Doesn't need to be over there. Off we go. And let's do a quick render of that. So that doesn't look too bad at all, actually. Probably spend a little bit of time just cleaning that up, but yeah, in essence, that's how you apply the Borg texture to pretty much any shape you like. You can, you can have a Borg donut, you can have a Borg Suzanne, you can have a Borg Armada. You can even, let's chuck a Borg Armada down Hyperspace. That was pretty cool, doesn't it? Let's go crazy. Let's throw a Borg Armada and a Borg Suzanne down Hyperspace. That's pretty cool as well. So, yeah, there's lots of flexibility in this. And, just have fun with it. Okay, so for this final render, really just to wrap this video up, what I did was I just added a bit of animation to the Borg effect there, mainly on that inner surface. So on the Voronoi texture, I just turned W on, made it 4D, turned W on, and just started playing around with that. It looks pretty good. Not overly convinced myself, but it just adds something. It makes it a bit more interesting. So that's pretty much it for this video. So if you made it this far, fantastic. You're actually in one of the lower percentages, which means you are utterly awesome for getting this far. So thank you again. If you've enjoyed this video and you've not subscribed, then please do subscribe. Give it a like. Please do drop a comment. Any suggestions, any ideas. Any problems, just let me know, and I'll try and help as best I can. Feel free as well to have a look at the links below in the comment, not in the comment section, but the description section for ArtStation. You can find me on there. I upload a load of stuff on there occasionally. That just leaves me to say thank you very much again, and we'll catch up next time. Cheers.